I believe that the evidence shows that she didn't hit him. I've said in the past that his injuries are not consistent with being hit by a vehicle. And by the way, the Lexus taillight braking, coming in contact with a human being and not a hard surface, makes no sense to me.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't. My mind fills up into a creature.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Just past the halfway mark at about 8 minutes into Court TV's analysis, we see CCTV footage of Karen Reid reversing out of a parking lot and then brushing or sideswiping or colliding into another vehicle. It's pretty incredible. Doesn't this change everything? And so doesn't this explain how, where, and why Karen's vehicle's rear light, why it was damaged on the same night her boyfriend John died of blunt force trauma? Remember, first of all, that this is a defense exhibit and it's quite an asset for their case, given the state's case. Secondly, it adds some reinforcement to the idea that glass fragments may have been planted at the scene. In other words, if Karen never struck John with her vehicle late in the evening, then there's no way fragments could have made it to the scene unless they were planted, right? Well, not so fast. Even if the light was damaged here and only damaged here, it is possible that fragments could have scattered all along her route. If Karen made a 3-point turn, that would be a natural place for fragments to dislodge. But is that what happened? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I will be doing a special live stream tomorrow, probably around about 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm still not feeling 100%, but the idea is to do a live and to take you guys through my assessment of this case. And it's really only going to be meaningful if you guys listen to that original video that I posted and do your own analysis. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button and let's get started. Now, on paper, the defense have got quite a strong case, don't they? We're seeing on CCTV that there's possibly another explanation for how her rear light was damaged, right? But the other aspect is, and I think this should be obvious, if there is CCTV of this impact, and if it's a material impact, right, it could be, we can't see very clearly what sort of damage occurred. But if it is a material impact, then surely if someone came later and picked up the fragments, wouldn't that be captured on CCTV as well? Also, did investigators check the parking lot near the tavern for fragments? On paper, although the CCTV seems like a strong defense exhibit, a good prosecutor could also argue it the other way. And that is kind of how this case goes. It always seems to be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. As soon as you seem to be going in one direction with the defense case, well, then there's a curveball from the prosecution. As soon as the prosecution side seems to be gaining momentum, well, then there's a curveball from the defense side. It's one of those cases. Anyway, let's go through what the prosecution could say to theoretically argue this particular point. And I'm going to mention 6 different points. Number 1, the CCTV actually proves just how drunk Karen Reid was. In other words, you can see her backing the vehicle into another vehicle, and you kind of get a sense that she really is very compromised in terms of, her cognitive abilities, right? Number 2, the CCTV proves that she struck a vehicle and kept on going. And so this was a sort of hit and run, possibly even a precursor to a more serious hit and run a couple of minutes later. I think that is a very interesting point, that you actually see her doing something that is quite serious. It's crashing into another vehicle or bumping into another vehicle, and then not even stopping to check whether the other vehicle's damaged or even to check whether her own vehicle's damaged, and what she then does is drive off. Number 3, does Karen remember this incident? I just think it would be very interesting to ask that question, because that would also to some extent address the question of A, culpability, and B, intentionality. Number 4, the CCTV also shows just how serious the snowstorm was. You can see that there's a wind blowing, you can see that there's quite a lot of snowdrift blowing in, and you can also, I think, get a sense of just how unlikely it is that Karen would see John hours later, essentially the next day, right, the next morning, and be able to see him, recognize him, lying in the snow, in her words, immediately.
How soon was it when you pulled in there that you saw John's body?
Immediately. And what struck me when I saw him was his mouth was open a little bit.
Number 5, the seriousness of the snowstorm. Well, all things being equal, that ought to have prompted Karen, if she was sober at least, to make sure that John got into the house okay. Why? Because Karen noticed John wasn't dressed warmly, and yet she failed to notice him either going into the house or that he was lying nearby, a dark figure in the snow.
At the foot of the driveway, it's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone.
Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her, and she drove back to his home.
Now, that audio is courtesy of ABC News, and that is from a Nightline, I think, documentary. And so, number 6, if she could notice him immediately when she returned, why couldn't she notice him immediately if he had fallen down into white snow right beside the vehicle? And I'm simply saying that these are counter arguments that the state could use, right? And I do think if you're going to ask a question like that, the answer might be the reason she didn't notice him immediately when she'd perhaps just knocked him over was that she was not sober. She was extremely not sober, just as she possibly didn't notice bumping into another vehicle, right? On the other hand, perhaps she didn't knock him down, and perhaps the story is that he did go into the house. And so that is really the question that we are testing this case on, is what do you think actually happened here based on the information that's been provided so far? So what is your opinion? Do you think this is where Karen Reed damaged her rear light? Do you think the fragments were planted, or do you think there was a second impact as well? Incidentally, as I say, I'll be providing my assessment likely tomorrow in a special live stream, so I hope to see that at least a few of you have thought about this case and know how to think about it critically. I'll be very interested to see those of you who've put together quite a concise, integrated, a theory in terms of this case. And I'll be engaging with you guys. I'll be trying to have a bit of a conversation on what I agree with and what I don't agree with, and then we'll see where we stand. Okay, so mods, I'll see you guys then around 3 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Until then, take care, and I'll see you guys next time.